Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. This is a reboot, a new show that the great Daryl Brooks and myself, Brian Smith.
Hey, how you doing?
We're putting this together. We've been talking for a while about doing a weekly show. I know the folks out there, you've seen me on Smyth TV for many, many years. And then Daryl started his own show. I've helped him out with that. On Fire. Phenomenal guests. I've never seen anybody pull on guests like you do.
Oh, me? Oh, this is personality, man. I Facebook people and I friend them, and I talk to them, and I've listen. Like Mary Sabrin, he's coming on. Fred the Hammer Williamson, he's been on. Tom Mesereau, Michael Jackson, Bill Cosby lawyer. So I'm just trying to get these different guests. And, my personality and friend them. And I just say, listen, I need to talk to you. Let's talk about what's happening. Let's have a show, interview you. It's been exciting. And, I was on you guys' show when y'all had a show together. And so I don't want to say his name, but
it's all good.
But no, but it's exciting, talking to people about real serious issues. Some entertainment, politics, social issues. So I had this next guest, Mary Sabrin, on 2 or 3 times. And he's a special guest, Federal Reserve guy, globalist, talks about the globalist issues, what's happening in America and around the world. So I just said, I wanted to give you a call, man. I says, listen, I like your style. Welcome to America. It's about coming together, doing some great things, and also educating people.
Absolutely.
That's what it's about.
Right. And for those of you who've never seen the show, or this first time you're watching the show, this is our first show together officially. Again, we're probably going to start doing this on a weekly basis, just to start off. And both of us are coming from a God-guided moral grounding. I mean, basically the founding of this country and the way it was founded. And we've got to get back to the basics if we're going to save this thing. And for those of you out there, if you're Republican or Democrat and you're doing the wrong thing, we're going to call you out on both sides. There's no question about it. And again, with no further ado, Dr. Murray Sabrin, he's a professor of finance in Anisfield School of Business.
Yes,
he's been
a member of the,
right. He's been member of the faculty since 1985. He's had his Ph.D. in economic geography from Rutgers University. Just all around phenomenal American. I'm probably gonna give you a little pushback. We're gonna have to wind up talking about you being libertarian and not running Republican, but that's okay, man. I still love you.
That's okay. Dr. Sabrin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Daryl and Brian. Thank you for inviting me on a kickoff show. I think it's the first time I've done a kickoff show, whether it's on radio or TV. And and an honor to do something like this, because we have a lot of work to do in this country, because we have to push back against more than 100 years of ideological takeover of America that started in the progressive period at the turn of this 20th century. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And since I'm a little bit older than you two gentlemen, I've seen things really deteriorate the last 50, 60 years. And that's why I wrote these 2 books, Universal Medical Care from Conception to End of Life. This is the alternative to Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All. This is about creating a new medical care system where the individual and the family are in charge with their doctor-patient relationship, and get rid of all the bureaucracy and get rid of all the paperwork and get rid of all the overinsurance that we have. And based upon the research I've done, gentlemen, I think we can reduce medical care costs, which will probably be $4 trillion this year. Think of that number. That's bigger than most economies of the world. We're just spending it on medical care. I think we can reduce that cost by 50%, if not more, based upon all the research I've done, showing how we're just being overcharged by hospitals, by other medical providers. And I think if we take the reins of this, and I'm hoping to undertake a project, which I will soon announce if we can get it off the ground, that could have a real impact on the American people and the future of medical care in this country, because we desperately need to cut costs and improve quality. And that's what this book is all about, is finding solutions finding a way out of this hybrid system that we have with employer-based insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, and just overreaching government involvement in medical issues. And in 1959, as you know, Daryl, I became a U.S. citizen, raised my right hand to support the Constitution, and I read the Constitution innumerable times, and I can't find anything in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to be involved in medical care. So we have a real constitutional issue. Therefore, healthcare is not a right, even though some people think it is. It's not in the it's not in the 10 Bill of Rights, and it's not in the Article 1, Section 8, which talks about the authorized activities of the federal government. So I wrote this book in the expectation that we start having a national debate, national discussion, a dialogue, if you will, without name calling, without finger pointing. And we talk about what's the best way for the average person to get medical care. We're not worried about the Warren Buffetts of the world and the Bill Gates of the world that have multi-billions of dollars, or the Michael Bloombergs. In fact, one of my proposals is every billionaire that's over 65 should renounce and get out of Medicare, just to save the taxpayer a lot of money.
How are they in Medicare?
I'm sorry?
How are they in Medicare? What?
Well, here's the way Medicare works. At age 65, you're eligible for Part A, which is hospital coverage. Part B is totally voluntary, so you don't have to do that. Warren Buffett and the rest of them, they have enough money to pay for their own medical care. In fact, the more I think about it, if you're a retiree over 65, and if you have $1 million of income, which is probably not that many people, but it's probably a substantial number compared to what people think it is, they should be giving up their Medicare benefits and going into the private market to get medical coverage. And then we can start phasing out Medicare over time, because what that would do would restore the doctor-patient relationship and reduce the need to have insurance for every single ailment that we have. That's not the purpose of insurance. As you know, the purpose of insurance is to help pay for these catastrophic costs. And those costs would even go down under my proposal. And I have another proposal that would shrink the size of government. And I wish the Republicans would get on board with this, because it would be so taxpayer friendly, so consumer friendly. Medicaid is $700 billion a year price tag for the American taxpayer. And it started as such a minor program in 1966 after the legislation was passed in 1965. So Medicaid, the solution to Medicaid is creating nonprofit medical centers. I helped create one in northern New Jersey back in the early part of this decade. And now they're celebrating the 12th anniversary this month at a big gala, a virtual gala, all funded by private donations. I'm a supporter of them. I support 2 other nonprofit medical clinics in New Jersey. There is so much money in foundations. The Bill Gates Foundation has tens of billions of dollars. Warren Buffett is giving 4% of his net worth to the Gates Foundation. He could take 4% of his net worth, which is about $4 billion a year, and literally create enough nonprofit centers located in the big box stores and other locations around the country to take the 50 million people or thereabouts that are on Medicaid and put them into these nonprofit centers that will be staffed by retired doctors. The model for this is Volunteers in Medicine in Hilton Head, South Carolina, which was created in the mid-1990s. And they're thriving. That's the model, a template for nonprofits around the country. And this is a great opportunity for the American people to go back to our fundamental values of volunteerism and community instead of a top-down approach that we have today.
You mentioned Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And I'd heard somebody in the past tell me that Johns Hopkins is reputable and trustworthy, and it's an institution that's standing the test of time. But I'm finding out that Bill Gates has got his tentacles in even Johns Hopkins.
Yep. I mean, that we should do a deep dive. I'm sure there's some investigative journalists out there on our side of the political spectrum that could uncover where all his money goes. In fact, when I was researching this book, I interviewed a longtime friend of mine who's a naturopath, and we chapters on wellness, and he said 40% of medical school revenues come from the pharmaceutical industry. So guess what? What do doctors learn? Prescribe medication for their patients rather than doing a holistic approach of finding out what the underlying causes are and treating them as naturally as possible with supplements, with other
Yeah, it works.
vitamins and meditation and all these other things that help people get back to optimal health. And so that's one of the things that I discuss in the book. And so we
Awesome.
need to take back medical care from the bureaucrats. I mean, George Clemenceau, who Ron Paul quoted in the endorsement of my book, said that war is too important to be left to generals. By the same token, medical care is too important to be left to politicians and bureaucrats and the pharmaceutical industrial complex, if you will. So that's why I wrote this book.
Oh, awesome! I love the book. It's a great book. Everybody needs to read this. Universal Medical Care for Conception to the End of Life. It's an awesome book, and one of the things we talk about Bill Gates and all the global elitists. As we talked about the Great Reset. It's amazing. It's amazing what these people have in mind for this country and the world. And I'm sure Bill Gates is somewhat part of it. A lot of the wealthiest people in the world. So, the reason why I wanted you on the show and Brian is talking about these issues is about the Great Reset, and to explain to us about that, and also about the World Economic Forum and Davos. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Again, doing some research about the World Economic Forum, it was founded in 1971, so it's 50 years old, by Klaus Schwab, who's an engineer and an economist. He's a very smart guy, and he studied in major institutions. But at age 33, he came up with this idea of stakeholder capitalism and founded the World Economic Forum, and he has a lot of major support over the years. If you recall, let's go back up a little bit. Years ago, when George H.W. Bush was president, he mentioned that we have to have a new world order. Now it's called.
Yes, he did.
And then now look at the timeline here. 1971, Schwab founds the World Economic Forum. 1973, David Rockefeller and others found the Trilateral Commission.
Oh, no.
Europe, the United States, and Japan, in order to put together, quote, a new world order. And who did they bring in? A peanut farmer from Georgia.
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter.
And I must say there's some good things to say about Carter, which a lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans don't want to recognize.
No, I don't.
The thing is, he is the one, to his credit, asked economist Alfred Kahn to study all the regulatory agencies in this country. And because of his study, we started to get deregulation in airline and trucking and all the other sectors that were heavily regulated by the federal government. And Reagan kept that going. And the deregulation of American business was probably one of the most important developments in the post-war period, because when you have deregulation, when you don't have the heavy burden of bureaucracy on business, they don't have to spend time and resources on filling out government forms and having price cartels by the government, like the Civilian Aeronautics Board.
Just real quick for the kids out there that don't remember this era, we're talking about President Trump and what he did as well. I mean, total deregulation.
Deregulation is probably the most important thing a president can do, because what that does is free up resources for production, which leads to more consumption, because as you produce, people work, they get paid, and then they will consume a lot of the things that are being produced. It's a basic economic concept. Before you can be a consumer, you have to be a producer. The things that I told students in my classroom, in every subject, I started off the course by saying, I can consume as a college professor, and first I produce something, which is what? Lectures to students about the economy, about finance. So they get it from a very basic point of view. To be a consumer, you first have to be a producer. That's why the welfare state is so counterproductive. It teaches people you don't have to be a producer to be a consumer, that all you have to do is have your hand out, or someone has to come up with a crazy idea like a basic guaranteed income, universal basic income, which says to people, you don't have to be a producer in our society to consume. All you have to do is just breathe, and we're going to give you $1,000 a month or whatever that number is. So having put the backdrop that the early 70s was a period when people around the world said, we have to take control over what's going to evolve in the world economy. And so you have the Klaus Schwab with the World Economic Forum, you have the Rockefellers and other financial political interests creating the Trilateral Commission. And you don't hear much about them today. They basically, I think, have gone into the World Economic Forum. And this is the elite of the elite, the super wealthy in our country, the super powerful political people in our country, having an agenda which is very simple from their perspective. We have to have stakeholder capitalism. We can't have shareholder capitalism. What stakeholder capitalism means is that instead of the shareholders and the board of directors determining the fate of the corporation or of the business, you're going to have people all over the community involved in running the corporation. This is sort of a view of the world that is alien to, I think, most people, but it's gaining traction because they couch it in some very touchy-feely ways about the environment, about diversity, about equity, about governance. And so this is how ideas evolve and take root after decades of not being able to take root. So if you look at the evolution of the country and these organizations, these supranational organizations that have been created, their goal is basically to control the way we live. The more ominous thing that they want is the former, I have it right here, the former, it's an interesting quote. It's a very interesting quote.
It's amazing.
Former Danish minister of the environment, Ida Auken, was given a platform at the World Economic Forum. And this is a little excerpt from her talk. She says, "Welcome to the year 2030. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. Someone else is using our house whenever we do not need it. I have no real privacy. Everything I do is recorded by the state. All in all, it is a good life." I don't know what. How is
it, Brian? How is that a good life? We don't own anything. We don't own a car. We don't own a house.
Well, 1984. Anyone? I'm just saying, this is insanity.
On family, on religion, on community, and private property.
It's the opposite of what America was based on. America was based on ownership, personal ownership. That's how we got to be in 245 years, the greatest superpower in the world. And now you're gonna flip that upside down?
This is why ideas matter. That's why being an academic for 35 years and retiring last year, which gave me the opportunity to write these two books, the Universal Medical Care, and the other one is for business decision makers. Have it right here. Right here. This is the new book, Navigating the Boom Bust Cycle, an Entrepreneur Survival Guide. And the publisher, if you go to their website, Business Experts Press, there's a 20% discount for the ebook or the paperback.
All right, we got to get that.
All you need is the code BOOM20, BOOM20, and it's a 20% discount. And guess what? This is Black Friday every day because the 20% discount is going to be in place, I think, for as long as the book is the publisher thinks the book has some life, because I provide specific advice to business people on how to navigate the boom bust cycle. So anyway, let's get back to the great.
So Dr. Sabrin.
Yeah.
I would like to know. I'm sure Brian would like to know the whole problem with COVID. Was that the start? Was that the start, or have they been putting it in place? I'm sure they've been putting it in place, but when COVID came, was that like a big jump, big boost to get things started?
Light the bomb, light the fuse.
This is how every government operates. They need a crisis in order to scare people, in order to intervene massively in the economy. And I want to recommend one of the best books on the subject, probably the book on the subject, is Robert Higgs's book from 30 plus years ago called Crisis and Leviathan, Critical Episodes in the Growth of Government. And he points out in that book, every time there's been a crisis in American society, throughout America,
Snatch.
government expands, but it never recedes to its prior pre-crisis level. So what do we see now? We have the income tax, we have the Federal Reserve, we have Social Security, we have Medicare, we have Medicaid, and all the other alphabet soup agencies of the federal government strangling the U.S. economy. But here's the beautiful part about the free enterprise system. We have enough of it still, and that's discussed in my new book. Entrepreneurs are so incredibly resourceful, innovative, creative. Despite the COVID lockdowns, a lot of business have been able to retool and move forward, while some businesses couldn't retool and unfortunately had to close their doors. That's what the lockdown did. It created opportunity for some businesses and destroyed other businesses. So the moral of the story is COVID was a gift for the political and financial elites, because what it allowed them to do is scare the hell out of people. And I'm convinced, I put this on Facebook yesterday, I'm convinced there will be people, even if they're vaccinated, will never take off a mask. And we were told that if you got vaccinated, we can go back to a normal life. And then you have President Biden saying the vaccinated have to be protected from the unvaccinated. When I heard that, gentlemen, my head exploded.
Crazy. Yeah, I ran into a woman the other day, said that, asked me if I could put a mask on. She was vaccinated. I'm not. I won't get juiced up. I don't need it. And I asked her, I said, why? Come on. Hey, why are you going to make me do that? She's like, well, my son's dying. He has 1.5 years to live. And I'm like, we're all dying. It just depends on when. You could die tomorrow. Me wearing a mask, your son doesn't even live here. And you're vaccinated, and you want me to wear a mask, and I'm not sick. I don't have fever. I don't have a cold. I feel great. I'm healthy as an ox. Yet you want me to wear a mask because your vaccine might not, and your son's dying, and he's got 1.5 years to live. It's a craziness.
There are so many misconceptions, misperceptions about what's going on. I spoke to a longtime neighbor of mine from New Jersey who's now in Florida for the winter. I'm in Southwest Florida. And we were talking about what's going on in the world and my writings. And we're talking about the new vaccine approval for children 5 to 11.
Nuts.
And there was a wonderful essay in the Wall Street Journal earlier this week about the data regarding 5 to 11-year-olds. And I asked my neighbor, how many children do you think between 5 and 11 have died of COVID? And he said 20,000. I said, Richard, it's 94.
I know. It's not even close.
More children die from drowning, car accidents, probably suicides than COVID.
Shot in Philadelphia.
Shot in Chicago. From 0 to 18, I think there's 80 million kids between 0 to 18. And out of that range, a total of 300 and some had died during the year of COVID. And now we're going to vaccinate all of them because of 320 people.
And we know what the problem is. It's the obese and the elderly with comorbidities, or anyone else who has comorbidities, whether it's hypertension, whether it's cancer, whether it's diabetes, whether it's heart disease, kidney disease.
Smokers.
When you have a comorbidity, your immune system is compromised. That's basic physiology. So if your immune system is compromised and you're not taking any supplements to boost your immune system, you're going to get hit with all sorts of viruses, bacteria, pathogens, what have you. And go ahead.
Okay, so I didn't mean to cut you off. So go back to the global reset.
Yeah.
Who are can we get some names?
Sure.
Do you have on the elitists in this country and around the world? Who are they?
I would say every billionaire, multi-billionaire is involved. Trump is not involved. I think that's why they didn't like him in his presidency.
And Republicans didn't like him either.
More information is coming out about this hoax business, about the Steele dossier. What a sham that was. What a corrupt document that was. And so he didn't play ball because he's basically an independent individual. But these are the elites that look to government, and here's the key term that they use: public-private partnership. Whenever you hear that term,
Private.
the F word should come up. That's the word for fascism.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
Public private.
when you have
No.
public-private partnerships, it usually means that the government is going to control the private entity that's involved with the government. And again, this has been going on since the beginning of the Republic with the Bank of the United States, the first Bank of the United States, and the second Bank of the United States. Banking has been sort of the nexus for the financial elites to get special privileges. And that's how we got the Federal Reserve in 1913. So again, the financial elites, most people on the left think the financial elites are conservatives and libertarian types who love free enterprise. No, they love crony capitalism. Because if they can't get something on the free market, they're going to go to the government to try to squelch their competition. As Warren Buffett famously said, there are two types of competition he doesn't like: domestic and foreign. And so that's a very famous quote that Buffett has made. And so what he tries to do is invest in companies that are not government monopolies, but he does own some utilities in the Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. Now, Buffett has, from what I know, has never gone to these forums, but he's also part of the mindset that the government has to be heavily involved in the social sphere of the country, even though his father was a Republican libertarian. Howard Buffett was a pro-gold standard guy, a pro-limited government guy. And Buffett basically has gone 180 degrees, even though he's a multi-billionaire, the third richest guy in the country, after, I guess, the fourth.
So quick question about that.
Yeah.
I've noticed that a lot of these billionaires are literally sold into the socialist communist ideologies.
Yeah.
Yet they made their billions based on capitalism, pure unadulterated capitalism. Is it some kind of guilt? Is it some kind of twist of logic? Why don't we have all these, whether it be the Zuckerbergs, the Bill Gates, Hathaways, Beto, old boy with the Amazons. I mean, what are we?
Yeah.
Why are we controlled by these people?
This is probably the most important question we have. Why have so many wealthy people gone so left-wingish in terms of their view? Buffett has been a Democrat for decades now. He says he's undertaxed. Well, if you're undertaxed, you can send the money into the Treasury voluntarily.
Yes.
And
they'll take it. They really will.
Yeah, but here's the problem with Buffett, I think, is that he thinks the government is an engine of good. That was John McCain's view of American foreign policy. We're an engine of good. Well, ask that to the millions of people in Southeast Asia that died during the Vietnam War, and they wouldn't agree with that. Or the people who died during the Iraqi invasion or the Afghanistan debacle for 20 years. So again, all these people make an ideological statement, and then they have a view of reality which is totally unsubstantiated, unsupported by what goes on in the world. I mean, government, as Washington warned us in his farewell address 20 years ago, is like fire. It has to be controlled, otherwise it's going to consume you.
Right.
And that's why limited government is one of the important developments that we need to address. Is how do we get from here to limited government? And it's going to take a lot of education. And that's why what Brian is doing, what you're doing, Daryl, is so important to get the message out. And hopefully hundreds of thousands of millions of people can view it and start thinking about these issues.
Yes, view the show.
And basically have some critical thinking. Let's use the word critical thinking in the way it's supposed to be. Are we on the right track? And the polls show the American people don't think we're on the right track. And the Biden presidency has definitely shown that with shutting down energy production in this country. Then they wonder why energy prices are going up, spending trillions that we don't have, claiming that spending more money is not going to increase the deficit when we're running a $1 trillion deficit. And I don't know what the numbers will show at the end of this fiscal year, but the Federal Reserve, and Daryl and I talked about this with my other book from 2 years ago about the Federal Reserve, they just flooded the economy, as other central banks have, with money. Commodity prices are going up. And now we've just seen yesterday, consumer prices are at their highest level in 30 years. And here's something that no one talked about. The October CPI went up by 0.9%. If you analyze that, that's double-digit inflation. That's 10.8% annualized. So we may be on the throes of double-digit inflation, which we haven't seen since the late 70s, early 80s, because the Federal Reserve just flooded the economy with money. That's another ideological blind spot that these people have. They think they can shape the world. In fact, they use that on the Economic Forum website, that they want to shape the world, which means control the world, because you can't shape something unless you control it. So they want to control the economy, social relationships, medical care, education. And we know the data and the evidence shows every time the government gets involved in something, it gets ruined.
Right.
We're seeing this in education. And education to me is sort of the ground zero for parents to say enough is enough. We're either going to homeschool our kids or create these community pods where the parents get together or hire teachers who are in line with their values and teach kids good history, economics, finance, geography, English, social studies, and make them critical thinkers and learn about the world that they live in.
So one of the things I was going to ask you about is John Kerry and his role in this. Seems like he's there. He is. You know, he ran for president, former United States Senator. He's there. What is his role? He seems like the ambassador to America for the Great Reset.
Yeah,
even when he's not in office, you know, breaking the Logan Act. Right.
I guess John Kerry is the Tom. What's his last name in The Godfather? The Tom, the consigliere of
Tom Kagan.
Okay.
What's his name?
Kagan, right? The Tom Kagan.
Something like that.
The
consigliere. He was in the Obama administration. Now he shows up in the Biden administration. I would want to recommend to you guys a great movie that was on TV that explains all this. We heard of Skull and Bones. These are that's at Yale University, where undergraduates are basically recruited to become part of the political and financial elite. Where there's a movie based upon this called The Brotherhood of the Bell, starring Glenn Ford. I saw it when it first went on TV. I guess it was the late 70s, early 80s. And I think you can Google it and find it on somewhere on the internet. But it's a movie that is essentially a fictionalized version of the Skull and Bones organization at Yale. And this is what the CIA did during its post-war. It recruited people from Yale and other Ivy League schools and trained them to become spies and become part of the the deep state political elite in America. And William F. Buckley was part of that group in the 1950s. And so what we have, there are so many books written about this, about the deep state. And this is an example of the deep state really coming on board and showing the world what they are. Thinking, and the public, unfortunately, too many people think they're doing great work for the environment and for climate and all this other stuff, and clamping down on businesses they don't like. But they don't understand economics. And for a guy like Klaus Schwab, who has a degree in economics, he really misses the whole point of business. That the purpose of business is, and this is where I think Milton Friedman got it wrong, is not to just make profit. Remember, profits are the residual of doing what? Meeting consumer needs.
Right.
You have revenue, you have expenses, and then you have profits. You don't get revenue. You can't get profits before you have revenue. You have to have revenue, which means meeting consumer needs. And if the consumers say no, your business goes under. Think of Sears, Radio Shack, Kmart.
Kmart picking up Sears. What a holy hot mess.
I mean, this is what the economy is all about. What just
Five Guys are closed, just closed up.
Really?
Five Guys, yeah. No guys. Five Guys, no guys.
So Two Guys, remember Two Guys, the department store, Caldors. There are so many department stores that went out of Gimbals. I mean, remember the Gimbals Macy's feud back.
I was told that Walmart is currently creating their own Amazon, if you will, with billions of dollars to try and compete against them.
Yeah, well, this is why inflation has been relatively subdued the last 25 years. I talk about it in my book. It's basically WAC, Walmart, Amazon, and China.
Yeah.
So the consumer has benefited because even though they haven't gotten much raises in the past 20 years or so, prices haven't gone run away from them. But now we're seeing with the flood of the money last year, because the Federal Reserve, quote, stimulated the economy by creating literally $4 trillion overnight. The money supply grew by 27% last year. And then people are scratching their head why we have rising inflation this year. Well, if you create trillions of dollars, that money is going to flow through the system, which is what my dissertation 40 years ago was all about at Rutgers, of how money spreads through the economy and raises prices. So we're seeing housing prices just go on a tear all across the country. Here in Southwest Florida, prices are up 30-40% in some communities from a year ago. That's unsustainable.
When if you listen,
so go ahead, Brian.
I was going to just say, if you listen to Ronald Reagan's speech, "Time for Choosing," what was it, back in the 70s, back in the 60s, and he's complaining then about the government, federal spending, and inflation, and what's to come. I mean, he was screaming it back then, and now we're living it.
Well, here's what I think could happen with this great reset, and what the implications are for the not only the U.S. but the global economy, is that the world central bankers are really caught between the so-called rock and a hard place, because if they cut back on the money creation, that will tend to crash the stock market and the economy. Right. If they keep on inflating, we're going to have a 1970s type of double-digit inflation. And so we could see this decade a series of really big booms and busts. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like what happened in 1987, when the stock market declined 22% in one day in October 1987. We could see a 10, 15, 20% drop in one day, because if people get frightened because of some event, whether it's China and Taiwan, whether it's something in the Mideast, whether it's something in Europe, who knows, that will trigger this, you could see a real major exit for the stock market, and you could have a major decline. And remember what happened in 87 when Greenspan had just taken over. As soon as the market collapsed in October 87, Greenspan really exploded the money supply, and that helped give us the dot-com bubble of the 1990s.
Right.
So we may see something that is going to give us a huge price bubble in this decade that could end very badly down the line. And that's why I wrote this book on navigating the boom bust cycle, because it gives entrepreneurs, CEOs, CFOs, specific advice on how to navigate the economy, no matter what's happening in the economy. But you have to be prepared. And so what the Great Reset is trying to do is to literally create a central planning entity that will tell countries what they can or cannot do, and that we, the people, will have to follow the dictates and mandates around the world, with possibly vaccine passports, with possibly, I just saw something the other day, you may have seen it, that the Biden administration is considering vaccines for domestic air travel. And so
wow, they're already implementing vaccine passports in California to buy food, or to go into grocery stores, to go into movie theaters.
And this is where the pushback hopefully will be accelerating, because I think what we saw in the election last week is that people are getting really tired of being talked down to and being treated like children, and having their kids being taken over by the state. And that's really why public education was created, is to mold children to be good citizens worshiping government. And
one of the go ahead. One of the things that you always talk about, and you look at Woodrow Wilson and the League of Nations. Is this similar to that, the League of Nations?
Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson was trying to push?
Our first communist president, by the way.
Yeah. And also he was a virulent racist as well. I mean,
yes, he was.
I mean, he comes from the South Virginia, and back then in the late 19th, early 20th century, that was the culture down in many parts of the country. So Wilson had this vision as a progressive, as sort of a messianic figure, that you have to understand. The ideas from Prussia were imported to the United States in the late 19th, early 20th century. And these economists who studied over in Prussia started preaching about the welfare state, started teaching about the welfare state. And the people back then started embracing that ideology. And a lot of those people wound up in the FDR administration in the 1930s. And that's how we got Social Security and these other programs, aid to families with dependent children. And it goes on and on and on. And of course, Bill Clinton comes from that school, and George W. Bush, who was no conservative whatsoever.
Right. George H. Bush's father. Right. So George H.'s father, so W's grandfather was involved in that whole cabal after Woodrow Wilson.
He was one of the most powerful senators from Rhode Island. Or was it Connecticut? I forget which state. They're close enough.
They're all the same.
I think it was Connecticut. So again, this is the Yankee culture that some left-wing historians and right-wing historians talk about. Is ideology is very important throughout American history, because that's going to determine who becomes president, who the political elites rally around to put before the American people. And Biden is part of that. He's been in public life since he became a senator in his late 20s. Bill Clinton became governor in his early 30s. These people are handpicked in order to continue the ideology of the political financial elites in America, which is to expand the government where they're in charge. They're going to reap the benefits from this, $6 trillion federal budget. It's mind-boggling how much money the federal government is spending, how much money is devoted to government expenditures. We all know about the military-industrial complex. We all know about the welfare state. And these are the two engines that are driving U.S. policy and our culture. And I'm devoted to breaking that culture by my writing, by my speaking, by appearing on shows like this, to get the word out, because the free market has created more wealth in the shortest period of time, lifted more people out of poverty in the shortest period of time than any government program in the history of the world. So the question is, why don't people like the free enterprise system? Because they're not in charge.
Right.
They're not in charge. It's a totally decentralized approach to social relationships, and they can't stand it. There are some people who are just itching to get elected to run other people's lives. And to me, I've never had that worldview. Even when I was a young Democrat back in the 1960s, I never thought the goal of government was to run people's lives, was to maybe to provide a minuscule welfare state, which we had back then. But we saw what's happening. I saw this in the late 60s. And then I said, the LBJ, FDR paradigm is not going to be good for the future of the country. And that's when I started reading, immersing myself in this limited government literature, reading one of the great little monographs of all time, which everyone should read online, The Law by Frederick Bastiat. It is probably one of the most important books you could read, in addition to Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, and What Has Government Done to Our Money by Rothbard. These are three books that everyone should read, and it'll change your worldview completely if you're a critically thinking person and you understand that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this great reset will not end well if it continues to encroach on our lives and on business. And it's couched in such flowery words that it's about making things better, build back better, by the way, which is a term from
Build Back Better.
Yeah, Build Back Better, which is a code word for
sound like Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah.
We own you.
That's it. We own you. And we're seeing this with COVID. This is what happens when the doctor-patient relationship is overridden by the government.
Right.
You get people so frightened that they'll do anything the government says they do. They'll cling to whatever Fauci says and implement whatever he wants them to do. And the evidence is overwhelming from the reading I've done, the webinars I've attended, from the doctors I've spoken to, is that if you have a strong immune system, you're not going to be subject to COVID. And if you do, there are protocols out there instead of taking the vaccine to prevent. And now we're seeing these breakthrough cases. So we know the vaccine does not prevent you from getting COVID.
No.
So therefore, it's not effective.
So one of the things, before you leave, because it's about 4:40, 44 minutes. I want to ask you, what should the people do, the citizens, the people that will be watching this right now, and what action should they take? What action should take place to stop this all around the world?
There are several things people can do. You can write letters to the editor in your local paper. You can do call-in shows. You can attend forums of your local congressman or state senator or assemblyman, or go to council meetings and just voice your opinion in a very matter-of-fact way. Don't scream, don't holler. Just get the facts in front of you, internalize the facts, and say, are we going on a path that is going to bring social harmony and prosperity to our communities with these programs? If not, let's change these programs because they are counterproductive to the goals that we all say we want: peace, prosperity, and social harmony. So how do we achieve that? We don't achieve that by taking from our neighbor and giving it to somebody else. So the welfare state doesn't work. Printing money doesn't work. Spending money we don't have doesn't work. Deficit spending will eventually have a day of reckoning. So we have to have a clear, concise voice. We have to have the facts at our side, because if you have the facts, then when the other side starts calling you names, you know you won the intellectual argument, because they can't argue the facts because they don't have any to back up their ideology. So you have to have the facts, and that's why you have to read Mises.org, LouRockwell.com, and other great websites, Future of Freedom Foundation, the Foundation for Economic Education. All these places have great articles about what's going on in the world and give you data to combat the leftist ideology that is overwhelming us right now. But I'm hoping we're starting to see pushback around the country where people are marching against the vaccine mandates. The Louisiana circuit court ruled that the mandates are unconstitutional, or they have problems with it. So I think the courts hopefully will be our bulwark against encroaching statism. But the point is, people have to be activists. If you don't want to be an activist, that's fine. There are enough people in the country that are concerned about the future. Well, they will say, enough is enough. We've got to let people know who are the decision makers, whether they're in the private sector or the public sector, that we're on the wrong path and that there's a better way to achieve what we all say we want. That's free enterprise, that's voluntary exchange, that is not these overbearing, overspending programs and printing money, because they don't end well. That's what the history of America and the world has demonstrated, decade after century after century.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Dr. Sabrin, for being on our, I guess it's a kickoff show for the most part. We've talked about this for a while. And and you can get both books on the Amazons. You get them everywhere, right? But you get the discount code if you go where?
Businessexpertspress.com, and just Google Navigating the Boom Bust Cycle. And it's a 20% off if you apply the code BOOM20. Boom as in BOOM 20, because it's what? 20% discount. That's why they came up with the discount.
Awesome. Thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you, Brian and Daryl, and great luck with the show. Hopefully you'll reach millions of people with the message of freedom and liberty, and we'll be on our way to retaining the country.
All right. Take care now. Wow. Here's a ball of fire.
Yeah, and he can just talk and talk and talk. Knowledge. And that's why I wanted to have him on the show, because we need someone, who has that knowledge, who's talking honesties about truth, freedom, and liberty. He's been like that for years, right out of New Jersey.
Right. We could take that 45 minutes and we could spend the next month unpacking all those ideas, all those examples of what's going on in this country, the names of players and the people. Something I was thinking about that I just wanted for the viewers to hear. When you're living in America and there's a lot of doom and gloom, and there's a lot of the government is fear death, and you're becoming paralyzed by that. I know Daryl and I both talk about this frequently, is that death has no hold on you if your focus is he who created you. through Jesus Christ, find he who created you. And death is irrelevant. There's a song, this famous song on the Christian station that says we're almost home. Guys, this is a flickering light. This life is a flickering light, and it's gone. 100 years from now, nobody's going to know your name. Nobody's going to know my name. And think about it. What does it all mean? This is the time for you to find your connection to he who created you and stop the fear.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It's when it's time. I love Martin Luther King and some of his speeches and his talks, and he talked about sitting at that coffee at the table and that cup of coffee, and he was so caught up in the anger. They was attacking him from all over on the phone, trying to blow up his house, assassinate him, did all types of things. He just had to get down on his knees and pray at that table. His song was "Precious Lord, Take My Hand." That's his favorite song by Mahalia Jackson. That's my favorite song. I love that song because sometimes at nighttime, I'm that way too. I just got to sit down at night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and start praying because there's so much.
Right.
There's so much that are against you. This is why you have so many young people are committing suicide. People are on drugs. People are on alcohol. Everything. They've lost their mind because of the pain, the suffering. What's on television? What's on the radio? What's on the internet? They're struggling. COVID, all these things. And it's you got to pray. People, you got to talk to God. You got to know God. You got to have that relationship with God.
Right. No, without a doubt. The church that we started going to during COVID that refused to close, the name of the church is called City on a Hill. It's phenomenal. The outreach for men and on the west side of Cincinnati, the homeless men, the drug addicts, is just tremendous. They've started a program. If you find yourself in a tough situation, you're focused too much on yourself. Guys, we've got to reach out for others and start doing to others as we'd wish them to do to us. Not do to others before they do to you. We got to cut that out. We got to start helping our fellow citizens. This is why we do the show, just to kind of get the information out there. It's there. Yeah. The truth is there. You got to go seek it.
Yeah, you got to. You're definitely right. You got to help others. We have to have empathy for people. We have to sit down with people. It's nothing wrong with just sitting down, buying somebody a cup of coffee, just having a conversation with them. What's your issue? What are you going through? If I can't help solve their problem, maybe I'll understand your problem. And that's just some people want people just to understand what they're going through. Having a conversation with people. This whole reset thing. And I just go back to this is that, these things are happening. And, the idea is once it gets really, that engine is really coming through, what are people going to do about it? Are people going to say, okay, I can't deal with this. I'm going to commit suicide. I'm going to get on some drugs or, just going to be violence. That one is when our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, kicks in. And people need to understand that. It's suffering is, King Tut, suffering is redemptive. You got to stand up. You can't be afraid. You look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace.
There's a beauty in suffering. There's a beauty.
Yeah, the beauty in suffering. Nebuchadnezzar looked inside the furnace and saw four. Who was that fourth one? Our Lord and Savior. So we have to have that type of strength, that inner strength. When God told Noah to build the ark, I'm sure Noah was like, okay, what are you talking about? All right, what's got to happen? It was that faith. And so, Brian, we have to build that faith for people.
I just found out it took Noah to build that ark. It took him 100 years. Think about that. By the way, living on the west side of Cincinnati, there's nothing more incredible than the ark encounter in northern Kentucky and Hebron, Kentucky. They built a life-size ark using the techniques that were used by Noah. And according to local code and law enforcement, it was not up to code, and they did have to use steel beams and concrete. But I digress. It is a phenomenal feat The information's out there. You can look that kind of stuff up online. You can find it. There have been more books written about, more songs sung about, more architecture built of, and more paintings painted of one single, and more movies, by the way, of one single person in all of human history. That's Christ. If that doesn't wake you up to say, hey, maybe I got a misconception of concept. Maybe this Jesus thing might be for real. I think you got to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, and I talk about some of these things happening in Philadelphia and Trenton and Chicago, and these young kids, and it just amazes me. A lot of this younger generation have never been inside of a church, Brian. Have never
even heard of it.
Never picked up a Bible. Never walked in church. So one of the things that I just get sad about is when I know when these young kids or when somebody might get shot, violence happens. Who are they going to call on? They can't call on a rapper. They can't. Who are no TV star, no musician, movie star. Who are they calling on? They're not calling on our Lord. If something happened to us as we grew up, we're younger. Some have, oh Lord Jesus, please save me. Say something. God, I need your help.
Yes.
Please let the ambulance. Please let the ambulance drive by. I'm sorry.
I did it again. I know.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Please let me live. Give me that strength and let me live. So, but that's how we grew up, and we have a generation that never walked inside of a church, never picked up a Bible. Their reality is what they see, and that's the sad part of a society have gone totally mad. You have inner city, suburb, whether they're black, white, or Spanish Americans, who have never, don't know who God is. And, they may say God, but they don't know who God, when it comes to Jesus Christ. Well, you know anything about Jesus Christ? No, really, not really. So it's one of these things that worries me, is because when you have stuff like we talked about the Great Reset, what do people believe on? Once they say, well, listen, I am your master, I am your control, I control what you believe in. I control your house, I control your car. Listen, I am your God, so you listen to me. That's what Dr. Murray Sabrin basically was talking about. A world government where people believe that, saying, I'm your God, I am the one that controls you. And that's scary stuff. It's scary stuff, right?
Nobody cares more about my money. Nobody cares more about my wife. Nobody cares more about me than I do. And I got to make those mistakes. I got to make the bad mistakes to learn from those, so I can learn and make good mistakes. And as we talked about, there's a beauty in suffering. If you suffer properly and you realize what's going on, and I had many years of being a victim of society, as Larry Elder calls it, a victocrat. And I had to turn around. I suffered because I deserved it, because of my own decisions. And now I suffer because I'm in a learning stage, because I don't deserve it. But when you do it properly with understanding, the growth is incredible. And that's not what we're teaching these kids nowadays. And it's just it's tragic, man. Tragic.
Well, suffering, you've suffered, and now you're a city councilman. I can't.
Right.
I ran for Congress, you were Senate, whatever. I can't even be a mayor. I can't city council. And listen, I applaud you, man, for that victory.
I appreciate that. I even came home for lunch during election day when we were out at the polls, and there were lies being thrown around that we were going to do things and wreck this and wreck that, and that's straight from the mayor. That's just absolute lies. And I came home and I was frustrated, and I was kind of venting on my wife. And my wife said to me, she said, praise him. Praise him when you're down. Praise him when you're up. I went back to the polls all happy. I said, let it roll. Roll the dice. And according to my cousin who did the numbers, said I won with a 61% vote. So
that's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Man, glory be to God. Truly.
Glory be to God. Me and Mary Sabrin that ran for all types of office couldn't win it. Couldn't win at all.
But city council is kind of a smaller little baby step.
I know. So, hey, listen, man. City council, mayor, the mayor, or the governor. You never know.
That's what
You
I'm talking
never
about.
know. Yeah, you never know what we all have to move to Ohio, but you never know what God has in store for you.
Right.
You know,
All right,
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, God bless each and every one of you for watching the show tonight. Our first of many to come. Keep an eye out on Daryl's page. Keep an eye out on the page that you're watching the show on. Working out some technical details, and we're gonna make this thing happen for sure.
Yes. Thank you, man. Thank you for sharing this show. It's awesome, and I'm excited. And we're gonna have some great guests on. And listen, it's if it's God's will, we'll be back.
Absolutely. Amen. All right, guys. Have a good night.
Amen. Thank you. Peace.